All right. It's been a while since I've posted. I wanted to take tonight to catch up because it's been frustrating for me as I've had a queue of topics I've wanted to broach, but just because of changes of things going on with my production work and events in my life, such as becoming a father once again, I wanted to just start doing broadcasts such as this to bundle them all together so I can still keep up on some kind of basis, whether it be monthly, bi-weekly, whatever it shakes out to be, but still be timely, which is something I haven't been for a while. So I want to begin tonight by talking about Roger Corman, who has been one of the biggest inspirations to me as a creator, storyteller, and just a student of film history. Back in high school, I used to raid the dollar bins at Walmart to pick up those compilation DVDs that were all usually public domain films or ones that were dirt cheap to license. It's how I was exposed to a lot of great B, C, and Z movies. And I remember I picked up the Sea Gods of Shark Reef, the old black and white thriller, and I enjoyed it just because of the amount of discipline used for the lack of an abundance of resources. And then I was curious, so I read up on Roger Corman, his methodology, and ability to tell A grade stories on B to C list budgets. And I went down that rabbit hole and seeing just how many creative personnel have launched from him, going from actors such as Jack Nicholson to directors such as Fred Olin Ray, James Cameron, Jim Wynorski, and just so many others. And when you look at his work on the cultural level, in terms of film and all that, and setting standards, he's the only director to have successfully translated Edgar Allan Poe to the live action screen. Now, I know there are some who will rebuke this and say, oh, well, Flanagan did such a great job with his Netflix series of The Fall of the House of Usher. And to that, I will agree that there are some genuine moments of brilliance in that series, which I dipped out after, I think, the second or third episode. It's just that Flanagan's excesses and pandering are, well, they undercut the success that he achieves for his objective moments of brilliance. If he hadn't tried to be so topical and just, drown in his own excess, you could have had a very disciplined miniseries that could have reset the bar, not just for Edgar Allan Poe adaptations, but horror miniseries as well. But he didn't have that, and kind of like George Lucas and a few other creators, you get to a certain point where you get rid of the people who can say no to you. Ultimately, what you end up with is having this kind of situation where you're making brilliant and terrible decisions in equal measure. Now, getting back to Roger Corman from that tangent, he brought Vincent Price's work into a whole new prominence with his Edgar Allan Poe adaptations. I recently purchased them from the Shout Factory blowout sale they were having, and I've been going through them, and I'm just amazed at the production value that was achieved on a low budget. I just have to say that when you really think about, when you're a filmmaker and how you spend your dollars, you want to spend them well. I did a lot of location shooting for my biggest endeavor, the adaptation of Stephen King's One for the Road, and just working on the budget of a ham sandwich, you learn how to use existing resources and spend what few dollars you have quite well. And I just looked at the lighting, the cinematography, and the design of those Edgar Allan Poe films, and I'm just amazed at just how he managed to channel such great gothic imagery and, make it just become a character in of itself, which is something Hammer Studios would later do when they reached their prominence. And just this talk about bringing Vincent Price to the Edgar Allan Poe films, that was like bringing Clint Eastwood to the Westerns. The iconography, the sheer presence he brought to those films was as good as every other aspect of them themselves. It was just a masterful act of casting and just finding ways to invigorate franchises that were old. I mean, because think about it, by the time he's doing this, Poe's films are not films, sorry, his stories, poems, and everything else are approaching the century mark. So while they're still being taught in school and discussed, they're not having that sort of relevancy. And Corman was able to do that to reintroduce them to a new audience at the drive-ins and other theaters. But beyond that, he also helped make them the new standard in judging Poe adaptations. And for that, I think the credit sometimes, gets spread on that, but not on other aspects he did. He was able to really push the grindhouse, drive-in experience to new levels with all these subgenres that he either invigorated, injected life into. So, you have the all manner of exploitation from the car apocalypse films like Death Race, which is one of my favorite lesser promoted and non-billion-dollar franchises, to him, cashing in on the science fiction horror craze post Alien. And so while he would ride those waves of currency by sort of reverse engineering what came before and finding a spark to it, I will still say that I prefer Forbidden World, his Alien clone, more than Alien itself in terms of casual viewing. If I want something to watch on a Friday night, I'll go for Forbidden World. Now, let me just say this: Alien has earned its status, as a cultural, artistic monolith, right? My one friend, a writer, said that the chestburster scene was a one in a lifetime extraordinary storytelling feat. But I just default to that Forbidden World, which takes similar concepts, manages to create a claustrophobic thriller with excellent set design and just a sheer dark comedy undercurrents that run through it, which make it far more enjoyable. I've only seen the director's cut of Alien, which is the only iteration of Alien I've watched once, and I have no inclination to visit. It was such a raw experience that I don't think anything could catch up to it or replicate it. Erstwhile, I've spun Aliens, which was made by James Cameron, one of Corman's proteges, dozens of times. And as many commentators have noted, he was one of the few who were able to balance budget and artistry in successful measure. And you look at today's cinematic landscape, and it just rings true. There are these people out there who are brilliant artists but can't market themselves to success. You have those who are great financiers who have no artistic merit, like Yui Boll, for instance, who hasn't really created any major films worth of note except that short film he did about the concentration camps, which I think is probably his most important work. But he's been able to work with the tax laws in Germany and been able to run a successful business making utter garbage of films. Even though he's a pretty sharp guy, his films, cause you to lose brain cells and make you really regret how you spent your dollars and hours for the night. So when you look at Roger Corman, he didn't just reshape cinema and help get the drive-ins going and help popularize new genres and launch iconic actors and directors. He wasn't just someone who shaped cinema. He was cinema with a capital C, just this person who was ingrained with it to such a degree that he just reshaped it in an image that benefited everybody. And I would say over the last 10 years, we've worked on successfully repudiating everything that he did. But I digress. He still taught a lot of indie filmmakers like myself from watching special features, reading the books, and interviews countlessly just to immerse yourself in that methodology. And there's a lot of lessons that I've learned. I've really focused on character-driven storytelling, learning how to use existing resources to create a visual language to cut down production costs and everything. And just, looking at market interest and finding a way to balance your own interest and finding what the audiences want and riding that line to not be too derivative or exploitative, but cashing in on the familiar. And just learning to work with the best people on a low budget. I mean, a lot of credit gets tendered to Industrial Light and Magic for bringing a lot of outsiders together to find their success and create a pillar of pop culture. But that's what Corman was doing the whole time when he was at the apex of his career, bringing in these outsiders into the industry. Because remember, James Cameron had been a trucker until Star Wars came out, which he went into filmmaking and then went through the Corman School of It, where he worked on the set designs for Galaxy of Terror and Forbidden World, which they reused a lot of assets. And one of them had spaceships walls made out of texture that was painted over of Big Mac boxes, which is a fun little detail. Anyway, so continuing forward, I wanted to broach that and just say, he lived to be 98, which is 28 years more than what we're promised according to the Bible. He had a long, successful life. And I think his legacy is going to live on just with all the people who he helped launch and then those he'll countlessly inspire in the years going forward. Anyway, changing gears. So the Yuputka franchise right now, my comic and novel franchise that I built using the original characters and public domain superheroes, it's been heavily inspired by Roger Corman's filmography. If you read the annotations, you'll see all the allusions and techniques and just sensibilities that I've taken from his work and those of his successors and applied. This is especially prevalent in Apollo Gal #1, where I break them down. The chapter headings in my Young Yuputka Nights novels are allusions to his films as well. Not all the time, but a good deal of them. Getting back to my main thread, though, so I wanted to go into black and white storytelling. And I found the best way to do this was with the character Spring Heel Joel, where I would be having little 7-page stories told in black and white zine format with little extras, just because I wanted to break down a smaller storytelling to sell at cons and also just bring that back because I love the DC artist editions of their comics like Batman The Long Halloween, where they took out the color and just left Tim Sully's inking and line work, and it was phenomenal. And, as somebody who grew up reading a lot of black and white comics, whether it was the Marvel Essentials lines or Eerie or some of the other Warren magazines that I collected at yard sales and flea markets, there's a lot of work that can be done with the medium, and I think we've gone so dependent on color that we sort of forget just how that black and white can create such mood, lighting, and tone with just such simple pooling of shadows and that light and darkness-based economy. So I'm going to be doing Spring Heel Joel's adventures. They're going to be about 7 pages to my Halloween adventure of the night. We'll be having these little vignettes when I'll have extras breaking down all the clever allusions and just some miscellanea that'll help bring it together. I'll be selling these at cons, and if there's enough reader interest, I might compile them into an omnibus. I already have two complete ones that I'm editing down. They're actually going to be future extras on a few of my books, but I'm porting them both ways so that they're published in high color in the deluxe editions of my books, while the black and white ones will be sold as zines. And I've enjoyed doing this because of my Young Yuputka Nights books. I wanted to add backup extras to them, and so creating little 7-page comics was helping it. So like right now, I'm working on the second Young Yuputka Nights book, Graphite Nights, and so I created a 7-page Alice and Spring Heel Joel story, which will be one of the ones that I'll be experimenting into black and white form down the road. But point being, each of my books will have a 7-page backup story, and I've become pretty proficient at writing these. It turns out it's easier to do short stories in comics than proper short stories. My creative writing teacher in college taught me a lot of the principles in that, but for me, it's kind of like glassblowing. I could articulate you how to do it, what to do, the methodologies, the history, the principles, the theory, and all that, but couldn't do it myself if it meant the firing squad. I've always worked better as a long-form storyteller, novelist, screenwriter, etc., etc. So thus, I decided to do that. Now, these zines will be popping up. They'll be black and white art. I'm going to have it commissioned as such, so I won't be trying to do the tinkering myself. They'll be created as it. And the sheer tone I like to really capture is Frank Miller's Sin City. It was one of the pillars that really influenced some of the earlier prototype novels I wrote set in my Yuputka verse, where I focused on the street level heroes taking on organized crime. So expect those down the road. Now, I had initially planned to try to start with my novels, having them broken down on a page level with colors. I was inspired by cartoonist Kayfabe's exploration of how the hip hop family tree manga omnibus was compiled, where they had different colored sections for each chapter. So I looked into that stateside, and my approach was at first trying to go for the telephone book approach because it was a clear antecedent and I knew it'd be cost effective. While I looked into it, the few remaining telephone book printers will not do anything less than 1,000 copies, which I wasn't going to fork out that much for this endeavor. I checked with all the large printers nationwide, statewide. They all gave me the same sentiment. It just was not going to pan out being able to print on colored pages like I wanted. Because for me, my novels are told through point of view, and I wanted to color code each section to represent a character's point of view for a lot of reasons, and especially is because I looked at some of the postmodern book history videos that were trending. Characters would go through, content creators would go through books like A Game of Thrones and use, colored post-it notes to delineate each point of view or major event. And so I was thinking on a postmodern lens on how to create some visual storytelling in my books without having to type characters, use the book, physical medium, as a storytelling vessel into itself. But it's financially and physically impossible to do it, because even if I went through and did cardstock and somehow went through and sewed the binding or did anything clever like that, the issue that I'd ultimately run into is not just the prohibitive nature of the time and cost, it's just that cardstock wouldn't be able to commit the stuff for long-term ink use with our current practices. So I really applaud what Fantagraphics and Ed Piskor and everybody did for the Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus. It's an experiment that's impossible to economically reproduce stateside. So it's pretty cool. Anyway, so the zines are a way for me to do this for black and white and just capturing the edgy aesthetic of some of the zines back in the day. That's something I wanted to do. And if it booms / takes off, I really want to explore this and maybe publish like in-universe zines from the characters written by other characters. I think that could be fun. Characters writing fanfic about each other, kind of like how we do about our mega celebrities today. You look at any of those the celebrity fan fiction archives, and it's utterly hilarious. Just imagining those same creative souls talking about the superheroes or the semi-powered celebrities of the world that I've created, which has been a recurring theme, which you'll see in the second book about how I've deconstructed the notion of celebrity and applied it to the demigods of old. Now, I'm not the first to do this. Neil Gaiman really took this as one of the primary threads and ran with it in American Gods under the postmodern lens, but I have a different approach to it. And well, Gaiman's kind of like, his books are like a fancy dinner in a French cafe. Mine's like a big greasy cheeseburger, and I'm quite proud of it. Stephen King compared himself to the Big Mac. Literally, for me, I would just default to being, in all honesty, Five Guys back in the day. Now, modern, in terms of our current times, the prices and the quality haven't been the best, but I can tell you Five Guys was the bomb back during the early thousands and 2010s. It was worth forking out for those ginormous burgers, which were just saturated with such flavor. Sure, your arteries were getting clogged, but you just enjoyed every second of it. It's kind of like my literature, I hope, with the readers. Even though I write in the lens popularized by Corman and all of his successors. So, mixed metaphors aside, it brings me to my last, one of my later points tonight. So, we have the new Arkham game coming out down the road, Arkham Shadows. Current literature is suggesting that it takes place before Asylum and after Origins, and I know I got that in reverse. I'm a little tired right now. However, there's been a lot of static generated about it. Now, like I said, when I played Suicide Squad and reviewed it, it was just a generic third-person shooter that was fun and honestly worth bargain bin price. Was it really worth the $70 I forked down? No, it wasn't. The criticisms of it, I would just default to is just the generic storytelling and just some of the random shoehorned in appealment to audiences that weren't invested in the characters of sacrificing continuity just for a few clicks of approval. But point being, it was fun. I enjoyed it, but I tapped out when I realized it was just going to be vast repetition and grinding, especially with how they were not taking the multiverse angle in an innovative way. They did so with some of the characters. I enjoyed Luthor from the Other Earth working with the squad and squaring off against Waller, but it just got to a point where I just got tired of the multiverse. And just I'm going to call it what it is, just the facetious quality to everything in it. Great design, excellent voice acting, but just a lot of facetious writing. But so with the Arkham games, right, that we have to reconcile with that Suicide Squad's part of the Arkham canon. I made peace with it because I knew the angle they were going, that it really wasn't Batman who died, but his doppelganger. Or I knew they would, at the very least, default to some time travel shenanigans or whatever. However, we have the new Arkham Shadow coming out, and it's a VR exclusive. Now, they've done this before, so it's nothing new. And this from the trailer and the press materials, they seem to be trying to return to the Arkham form of old. And I appreciate that. It's looking what the audience wants. We want new Arkham content. We haven't had any for a while. And I'm talking about just outright Arkham content. Focusing on Batman, having a clear delineated story, with the structure and all those expectations. Now, I wasn't going to say to undercut Arkham Knight, although we always read little snippets about the proposed Batman Beyond video game set after Knight, which would have been bonkers. However, I remember reading rumors of a game they were developing, which was going to be set after Origins, much like this one, and have Batman going up coast on Gotham, dealing with the Court of Owls, having a pared down Batmobile, focusing more on detective angle and all that. It sounded really good, and a lot of those ideas were scrapped and honestly implemented into Gotham Knights, which was another game not worth the pre-order. I finished it and enjoyed it, but a lot of repetition, and it just didn't have the kind of edge the Arkham games did. I mean, I resolved to finish it, but I ended up having to abandon it for about a week or so because I just became bored. But returning back to Arkham Shadows, there's a lot of static being tendered towards it. It's a VR exclusive. And why is it not going to be this and that? And here's the deal. And I'm not a studio simp or anything of the sort. They are making an attempt to try to return to a classic form of the Arkham franchise. Yes, we had Arkham VR, and, it was good for what it was. And I've talked to some people who are actually excited about having an expanded version of that. Me, I'm not going to be getting it just because I looked at VR headsets and they're quite expensive, and I'm at this point wanting to save for another console, an Xbox. But the point is, you have to try to find a way to compromise things just to say, hey, they're making an honest single-player offline story that's not going to be a live service. And right now, Warner Brothers and its rotating stable of owners, they've been taking the wrong lessons from their successes and failures. And so you look at this angle of, okay, if they make it an excellent VR game, but we're complaining about it being a VR game, they might say, oh, maybe the Arkham franchise is not as economically viable as it once was. I mean, unfortunately, games are not cheap to make anymore, and that's why they have to find ways to offset the cost with very shady means, like loot boxes, the live service model, in-game ads, and all of that. And as a business owner, I can look at it and I can understand. But as a gamer, I don't like those kind of intrusions that take me out of the gaming experience. I mean, I'm not fond of the live service model. I honestly think the best approach is doing the updates like Ed Barone's been doing for Stardew Valley. Just hype them up with these quality of life enhancements periodically. And to an extent, Rocksteady experimented with this when they brought in their version of the Robert Pattinson Batman suit to Arkham Knight. And I think if they just sort of did concentrated things like that, or even just as sales of DLC, people would be more receptive to it. I mean, as a gamer myself, I would be happy to pay for DLC that was meaningful and just beyond cosmetics. Don't get me wrong, I bought the Nolan suit the 89 suit, and I think the Adam West pack. But I didn't go and splurge for all the stuff till I later bought the season pass at a heavily discounted price. If you make things that people want, like cosmetics, like, let's bring out the Panther suit from Batman Forever, or, just something like that, you could really draw the buyers in. But, I mean, they're seemingly making an effort with Arkham Shadow. Now, we haven't seen exhaustive gameplay or anything of substance for it, but it seems to be an effort in the right direction. Now, I could be wrong and have to acknowledge it in a future video saying, hey, I gave them the benefit of the doubt. They kind of let me down. But I think just the Arkham fan base needs to just take it easy a bit, okay? Yes, Suicide Squad was not what we deserved as a continuation of it. Don't get me wrong, as I said before, I like the idea of Batman at his lowest point in time meeting the Justice League and helping, change everything. There's a great story to be told there, but we didn't really get it. It was in the lore part of the Suicide Squad game. So, where do we go? I mean, I enjoyed the Arkham comics. I enjoyed the movie, which is no longer canon because of Suicide Squad. There's still a lot of juice left in the brand, and I just hope that the game succeeds and is worth the price and the hype so that we can see the brand be restored and maybe get more content. I wouldn't complain if we got another Arkham game that was set in that between Asylum period. There's a lot that can be done, a lot of classic villains who haven't been incorporated yet. And you don't have to have the Joker as the deciding villain in it either. I appreciated how at night they made the Joker the Virgil to Batman's Dante as he went through the hell of a scarecrow-bombed Gotham. But at the end of the day, though, yes, the Joker was used in many different literary ways to great dramatic success, but you gotta just look at the fact that he's become so oversaturated, he's the default villain for everything. I'm not saying to admit him, but I'm just saying not to overplay him because as much as I love Arkham Origins, the reveal, while done as well as it could be, was a little annoying that Black Mask was cut in favor of Joker. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the cutscenes leading up to it where Joker starts to break character, but that's besides the point, though. And speaking of point of view, character breaking, and everything else, I got two last thoughts tonight before I go. So, the first one is reverence of characters. So, in working with public domain characters, I try to look at the author's intentions for them, see how they were used, and reconcile them with the time and culture shift that I've done by setting my stuff primarily in the 1970s. And I try to dignify the characters that people created. And there's a lot of behind my ethos, but the simple line is some of these aren't the toys that I made or bought, so I'm using them like to try to leave them in as good condition as I found them. And if I can inspire somebody to play with them in a different way, that's all the better. Game of Thrones did one of the worst character assassinations I have ever seen with Stannis Baratheon. In the books, Stannis was a harsh but unflinching pragmatist. In the show, D&D even said in later interviews they were trying to use him as their epitome of religious extremism and even expressed to having a deep dislike of him back in season 2 interviews. And that's why I became really angry with the show in its later seasons because, sure, some of the decisions they made were for cost and practical reasons like getting rid of Lady Stoneheart, etc. But Stannis, though, was just made an utter idiot. Stephen Delane, who played him, said in an interview that, I didn't know he was a tactical genius in the books. And that just became lost where they just, clowned Stannis so many different times. And when they finally treated him with some dignity in season 5, I think it was, what ultimately happened was that, they gaslit the audience and then made him another monster who, everybody lost interest in after his unceremonious death. And, just to clarify the outcomes of Stannis in the books, and what they could have done with the show, he says in A Dance with Dragons that he had a vision of this recurring dream of wearing the crown but having it turn to ash. And he's telling this to Jon Snow, where he literally, I'm sorry, pardon my phrasing, he relates to him like, hey, I don't need Melisandre to tell me what it means. I know I'm not going to be the king. I can embody what we would want for a king and to show what that king should do for his people, but I'm going to die trying to do what's best. And while he didn't initially have his heart set on the wall, once he's at the wall, though, he does show a genuine interest in trying that. And there's so much dramatic ground they could have broached with him, but instead they just had him fall for every clumsy, wily coyote trick in the book. And that just didn't sit well with me and still hasn't years later after the finale. That's why I really wish the Winds of Winter would be finished so that we can at least have Stannis written off in a satisfying way. I mean, I would hope that he would at least take Winterfell and Fall taking on the others. Just because in the books he's established as being superior tactically to Ramsay Bolton. And, we could have had a really superb showdown being done. But anyway, that just didn't sit well with me. And it sort of ties together with some of these other themes because, the fans, there were fans of Stannis, even as they clowned him and, just treated him like a incompetent buffoon. And I know it's a double redundant, but it's 11 in the night. I'm a little tired. There are still fans of him who respect him just because Stephen Delane did such a great job of embodying him that he still found some way to dignify him when it was continually being leached out of him. And that's why sometimes it's good to look at fan response and incorporate the feedback in a productive way, where you can't use every single piece of feedback that seems reasonable because for a lot of reasons, practicality, artistry, consistency, and planning and all that. But it's good to look at what your audience is wanting and work with it. It's why I'm expanding the Spring Hill Joel stories because I've had a lot of positive reader feedback. I want to see more stories with them, which is why I'm looking on the zine black and white format to work with reader responses in a meaningful way. I can't really make him the central character in the novels, but I can work with side stories to do that. And leads me to my final thought tonight. So, like I said in an earlier video, we're never going to get the Winds of Winter and the Dream of Spring. However, I've been rereading the saga and the compendiums, The World of Ice and Fire, and of course, Fire and Blood. And this just has occurred to me. It's a short idea, a simple one, but I think there's some validity to it. I think the best option, if they were going to try to salvage this situation that's unwinnable, that we'll never have a Song of Ice and Fire finished in this lifetime. George loves writing lore. He's done that with Elden Ring, where he created the whole lore for a fictional world that was not made by him. I mean, they had some of the tentpole things, but he fleshed it all out and did that. But he didn't have that, 100% curatorship like he did with his own Song of Ice and Fire. And he loves the lore books because he's put a lot of passion and time into the prequel, side story, lore compendiums. And I thought, why not just collapse those into a compendium? He can plan out the battles, all the major beats, and not have to go through the nitty-gritty of writing them. Especially because, of the engagement with reader theories and what the show did. He could incorporate what he liked, disparage what doesn't, and it'd be a way to wrap up the franchise within this lifetime. Yes, I know novelists like to be able to tell all the dramatic beats of stories and go through it, but even if you read his interviews with A Storm of Swords, he put off writing the Red Wedding scene until the very last minute when he had to. And I would say the best and cheapest and quickest out for him, using the Roger Corman method of being practical with your budget, time, and artistry as well, not compromising either, have him do one massive compendium and call it, The Long Night, and just spell out those 2 books and wrap it all up so that, yes, it'll be told in the quick, easy-to-digest lore format that he's quite fond of, but also give us closure on the franchise so we won't have to have this kind of James Patterson situation where they airlift him in to try to take the outlines and notes and finish it out. And no, I'm not knocking Mr. Patterson down. I'm just trying to make a direct comparison with his work with Michael Crichton to what would hypothetically happen when George Martin passes. So those are all my thoughts tonight. I'm trying my best to organize them into some kind of a through line. But anyway, I'll try to do these updates when I can. Let me know what you think.